Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nightlight. It's going to be a great evening, so I'm so glad you could all join me. I want to thank first Ken Quiethawk for his amazing intro. Please check him out on Google. He and his wife are native storytellers, and they have an amazing way of preserving history and cosmology with their stories. And in my opinion, a much better way rather than, a dusty book. The stories live forever because they're passed from generation to generation. They're entertaining and they're educational and enlightening. Please check it out. So tonight, I have a favorite of mine come back again. I have Brad Olsen with me, and he's written a book called Beyond Esoteric, Escaping Prison Planet. And it's an amazing book, and it was amazing the first time I read it, and the second time I read it, it was even more so. Nothing in this world works the way you think it does. There is always more to the story. Be aware that there is a war for your mind and your soul. Corporations have taken over government in a new form of fascism that now incorporates high technology and artificial intelligence. Survival of the human race may depend on breaking the embargo of truth and collectively developing an ÜberMind. But truth always resonates. Beyond Esoteric takes off the kid gloves and exposes the control grid extending its tentacles across the planet. The word occult means nothing more than to study the realm of the hidden. So much of real knowledge and wisdom is disguised because the people who run the planet feel that true information of how the world works and how to manifest reality is something you don't need to know. Everything we think we know about the world and the universe in which we live, whatever we've been led to believe concerning the course of human history, could very well be completely wrong, distorted, and misinformed. The 19th century teachers of the occult could never have imagined the ultimate journey of the 21st century we now face, one that extends far beyond esoteric. Brad is an author of 10 books and an award-winning author, book publisher, event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audience at Contact in the Desert, UFO Mega Conference, the 5D events, and dozens of radio shows, including Coast to Coast, Ground Zero, Fade to Black, and of course, Nightlight Radio. And television shows, including Ancient Aliens, America on Earth, Beyond Belief, and Mysteries of the Outdoors. He is a founder and co-producer of the How Weird Street Fair in the Soma neighborhood of San Francisco. His esoteric writing continues to reach a wide audience while he continues breaking ground in alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. And I would just throw into the mix a philosopher, and a bit of a prophet. So I would say we are in for quite an adventure with him tonight. Gonna hope I push the right button. You there, Brad? Welcome to the show. Wrong button. You there, Brad?
Yes,
Hi.
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah. Mark pulled a new one, and he pulled you in on two different places, so I wasn't sure exactly where you were.
Can you hear me
but
now?
I got you in. Yeah, I can hear you, and it's fine.
Oh, great.
So,
well, thank you for that very warm, glowing introduction. It's funny you mentioned prophet, because just a quick funny story. When I was in Egypt way back in '93, I all the times you check into a hotel, and I was with my girlfriend, and they always ask you your profession. I was like, why do they keep wanting to know what I do for a living? And one time in Egypt, I wrote down prophet, and we turned in our forms, and 10 minutes later, the hotel manager's knocking on the door. He said, you can't write prophet as your occupation. They make me change it. So I've tried that once before, and it didn't really work out.
Well, hey, a prophet is not usually known in his time. I think Jesus said that. But you wrote this book, parts of it, before it was published in 2021, but you wrote parts of it before the pandemic started. And
oh yeah,
I read the book again because I wanted it to be fresh in my memory, and I kept thinking, holy cow, he had this pegged. It was like there was so much that you wrote about that after the book was published began to unfold, that it was sort of like, yep, he's a prophet. You followed the leads, and where they led you was to, uncover a lot of the truth. And I don't think all of the truth is uncovered yet. So I think we have many surprises yet to come, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A lot more surprises to come. But a lot of the subjects that I wrote about, not only in Beyond Esoteric, which took me 6 years to compile and write and edit, collect the images and put it all together, a lot of the subjects in that book and the other 2 books in the Esoteric series are starting to come true. So when it becomes known to the general population, the nature of the word changes to exoteric. And there's nothing that delights me more when a lot of the things that I wrote about as this secret covered up material is now getting out even into the mainstream, and people are understanding it a lot better. And it just goes to show, Barbara, how much of this stuff has been kept from humanity for so long.
Well, I think that often people will say, look we aren't as high tech as we should be, and it took, look at it from the first airplane to jets has been phenomenal, and then there are other areas where it hasn't been. And I don't think many people take the time to look at our own development as a human being, as a soul, as a spirit, as a consciousness, and where we've had physical things that we can prove and see and we're impressed with. The internal journey has been thwarted and in many ways just blocked, and we've become dumbed down, and I don't think we actually realize what's being done to us to prevent us from excelling as far as the development of our spiritual aspects.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a big part of all 3 of the esoteric books, is how much potential that we have. One of the first chapters I wrote was called Superhuman Abilities, because it just seems that, well, if you look at all the comic book characters, and now they've made them into movies, all the superpowers that these superheroes had that we've been grown up with comic books and now in the movies, they're all what our potential is as humans. So some of them have telepathy powers, other levitation, or using different, even like AI or mechanical techniques of enhancing the human body. And now so we understand what transhumanism is, and that's a whole other ball of wax that's unfolding right now too.
Well, do we really want to go transhuman? Because when you think about, I think what has frustrated me in the last couple of years is that so much stuff has been written about and studied and philosophized on between the last ice age and now, so that we're only going back 9,000 years or so, or 15,000, whatever it is. And I want to know what happened before then, because according to science, especially, there have been several mass extinctions that have happened, and humanity has had to, let's not say humanity. Consciousness has had to evolve again from single cell on, and so I would, they are coming now up with, there are civilizations, the ancient civilizations that are prior to the last ice age, that we're far even more evolved than we are as far as technology and everything else. And we're not even looking at those areas and trying to figure out what happened, why did we lose it, how do we gain it back? And it's the same thing with Atlantis. How do we get to that level without screwing up? And each time there's been mass destruction, each time we've been taken way back down to very primary sources and intellect and everything. We have been inspired by interdimensional people that have sort of hit our DNA, so that we started to awaken to the talents and the gifts that we have within. And I keep wondering, do we keep screwing up? Do we keep having to go back to go? And are we on the track now to go back to go again?
And that's why understanding these subjects that we're talking about, that I write about in my books and you bring up on your show week after week, is so important for people to understand, because so many things are coming to a head, meaning we're capable of the human race destroying each other and the planet while we're at it. We're having this crazy weather turns all around, and you can tell that the planet is very stressed out too. And so many things are coming to this crescendo moment for Earth and the human race and all that we've led up to, and we can't blow it. We've got to pull this off and get us through it. So that's why I'm really encouraged when I see a lot of people waking up to this information and understanding it to be true. And I think a lot of it is just coming through our intuition, and we're just starting to really feel it at the core of ourselves, what is real and what's not. Because I think if I would even listen to my own interviews 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't even believe what I'm saying now. But I believe it's true, and I've also accumulated a lot more research to know it's true and real, that it's the zeitgeist of the age. I think that's probably the best way to put it. It's just who we are in this moment. And I think a lot of us have volunteered for this mission to come down and help the Earth and help the human race in this ascension moment, myself and yourself included. And that's why we do the things we do and feel so passionate about it too.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, because the more I read, the more I interview, it gets more and more expansive, and it's sort of like this has happened before, and my feeling is if we mess up, we'll still have the opportunity to come back and do it again, but I'd rather not. I'd rather see us, it's sort of like you keep repeating a grade until you achieve all that you have to, and then you can move on to the next grade. And that's what it feels like where humanity is. And I think that now, for the first time, there's always been rumors, and people have been saying, well, there's got to be a conspiracy out there. And now, especially with the research that you've done, I mean, it's not a maybe there's a conspiracy. It's yes, there's a conspiracy, and this is how it's being applied to you. And it's up to you to break the mold, to not go along with it. And the more you listen to and watch things that are happening in the political realms, you begin to understand, wait a minute, there's something very, very wrong here. And I mean, let's take it way back, because I think it's important for people to understand that while there is conspiracy going on here, it isn't just the stupidity of the politics of the day. This is something that has been going on for hundreds of years. This is a plan that was put into play, I don't know how long ago, 1700s, 1600s, something around there?
You could even make an argument all the way back to the pharaohs of Egypt were perceived as the ruling class, were considered living gods. That's what the pharaohs were. They were still humans, but they were revered as gods. Then when the Roman Empire took all the Mediterranean countries around it, the Caesar was considered a living god, and he was worshipped thus. And now you have the Pope in Rome who has an ear to God. So this ruling class, this whole structure to keep the rest of us in line and ignorant, I think has been going on for thousands of years. But if we can just take this up to the last century, John D. Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire and then started pharmaceuticals and influenced the medical community quite a bit 100 years ago, he had a famous quote, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." Well, doesn't that go counter to bringing out the best in everybody? This other guy, let me just read one more quote. H.L. Mencken said also about 80 years ago, "The aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry to put down dissent and originality." So this is what we've been up against, at least for the last, our generation and our parents and grandparents have just really been oppressed by this moneyed elite who have really wanted to retain control, as I said, since the time of the pharaohs, for not just hundreds, but thousands of years. This has been the matrix, the hierarchy of the top and all the rest of us down on the bottom of the pyramid there.
Yeah, I mean, you use the right word, because it does feel as though we have been existing in a matrix, and that it's time to sort of break out. It's time to question. It's time to fight. It's time to stretch. And I mean, I was one of the things you wrote that really frightened me and upset me was how the kids today are actually being trained to be soldiers that don't think but rather act with all of these war games they are playing and that they're addicted to. So that at some point in time, if they actually are in a position where they have live weapons, they won't think twice, with pulling the trigger. It'll just be like another game. And it's sort of like the creativity, the inspiration that is within every individual is being shoved down, dumbed down, and thwarted. And people are no longer rewarded for their brilliance at being different. It's almost as though, come on, it's like Stepford Wives. It's like, be a member of the club and don't make waves. And certainly the pandemic gave everybody a chance to take a look at themselves and their lives. And I think it was one of the, it was fortunate in that it gave everybody a timeout so they could look at their lives and they could see if they were doing what they wanted to do, and if they weren't, it gave them a chance to shift and incorporate more of the creative things in their life to help enhance that aspect of themselves. What I have seen is, either people, really flowered during this pandemic, strangely, or if they allowed it to beat them down. And, it's almost like it's dividing the population in a way. And I not even into the vaxxed and non-vaxxed, it's how did you use the time? Did you work on yourself? Did you stretch yourself? And I'm finding that more people are awake now than were before this started. This was a wake-up call for everybody in many different ways. But prior to the pandemic, how were they dumbing us down? I mean, certainly with the schools. I taught school, and I have been horrified at what schools have been not doing and are doing to children, and they aren't in any way, shape, or form educating anymore. I don't know what they're doing. They're programming. They're programming the kids. They're not teaching them. They're not teaching them to think. And I don't know how long it's been going on, but probably for the last 30 years or so, there's no education going on in this country at all.
No, and that's why I brought up those quotes. And I like what you said, that we have to tear down this false matrix and build it up anew again. And education is top and foremost on that list. Look, even when we were going to school, we had all the rote memory skills. Just memorize this. It's what you have to do to pass your tests. Memorize. Mm-hmm. The creativity was taken out of it. Where's the fun in learning? And so when I started my writing career, it really started to blossom because I could really dig deep into the subjects that really interested me the most, that I never learned about in school. But as I had the opportunity to travel around the world, many of those things came together too. So geography, and I did a whole series of books on sacred places and other cultures around the world, and going to India, the most spiritual country of the world it's considered, and seeing sadhus walking the streets with just a little bag of all the belongings they had in the world, and long dreadlocks to their butts, and wearing paint of Shiva on their forehead. I'm like, what is up with these guys? I mean, there really are people that walk the world seeking enlightenment in devotion to their gods here in the world today. So getting out and traveling abroad, and now I've made it to all 7 continents, and having that worldview of what it's like in so many different countries around the world and the different continents has just been so invaluable for putting together the material in my 3-book esoteric series. Really, I couldn't have done it without having that travel experience.
Well, I truly I go along with you on that. I mean, I've got 2 master's degrees in teaching, and yet everything I have learned in the last 40 years, I taught myself because I was curious about a subject, and so I learned about it. And then the radio show became another great way for me to educate myself, because I get to talk you guys into giving me 2 hours of your time so you can educate me. And, and I don't have to pay for it, which is even better. But these are master classes in philosophical breakthroughs on all different levels, on all different topics. And it's not that people have to have a radio show to do this. There's lots of ways of doing it. This just happened to be the one I fell into, and it works so well for me. But there is an excitement in learning, and the older you get, the more excited you get about it. I don't think I've ever been more excited in my life than I am now with all of the amazing people I get to talk to, and it's all from my computer. I don't have to leave home. I don't have to try. I hate traveling. I traveled for a while with a deck of cards I did, and I didn't like living out of a suitcase at all. So my thing is, let me have my own, bedroom and my closet and my bathroom, and I'm fine. But what's going on here is that so many people are confused. They're upset. They feel they've been lied to, and they have been. And I don't think they understand how badly they've been lied to. I think one of the most profound things that that hit me again when I read your book was the 1871 passage that took us out of being a republic and put us into a corporation, so that we are all assets of a corporation. We are not individuals of a republic anymore. That I mentioned that to a couple of people. They said, "Oh no, you're wrong," and I said, "I don't think so." You want to explain to people what happened there?
Yeah, sure. And this is another one that people are starting to wake up and understand how our government was hijacked by the corporatists, by the bankers. And Andrew Jackson, the president who's on the $20 bill, his nickname was Old Hickory. He was the last president to kick out the central bankers and bring the balance sheet to zero. We had no national debt at the end of his term. But he knew they'd be back, and they were back right after the Civil War, in which Lincoln, much like Kennedy, were probably both assassinated in a false flag type of event, or at least those assassins were supported, because both of these presidents were going to bring the money system back to the Treasury. JFK even printed Treasury notes in red ink. They're very rare bills, $2 and $5 bills, right before he was assassinated. And then Lincoln brought in the greenback, the dollars, kind of as we know it today. But in both cases, after those presidents were assassinated, they went back to the central banking system. So in the Act of 1871, shortly after the Civil War, his successor was also named Johnson. So many parallels between Kennedy and Lincoln assassination. Both had vice presidents named Johnson afterwards, and both were terrible, absolutely terrible presidents. And I was born under the second Johnson. So he was out after a term, and then Ulysses S. Grant. And I've always thought it curious, why is he on the $50 bill? Well, he ushered in the Act of 1871. But by all measures, he was a terrible president, too. He was an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic at that. And Congress was very corrupt. It was during the carpetbagger years in the South, trying to reformulate and build back up the South. So the country was broke. The country needed money, and in come the central bankers again. They said, well, this time we're going to change things up. We're going to amend the Constitution, more like not an amendment as we would know it so much, but supplanting a new system of laws, and that is admiralty law. The law of the sea took over the common law in the Act of 1871, and that is what monetized every single person in this country. That's why every time you see your name on official documents, from your birth certificate to your driver's license, your name's always in all caps, because that's like your corporate identity, the straw man. And so you operate under this account in the corporation of America, totally unbeknown to most people for their entire lives. Yet our names are collateral and is actually traded on Dun and Bradstreet. So we are considered just collateral to this U.S. corporation, and presidents are more like a CEO than a governing body ever since the Act of 1871. So then once they did that, then in 1913 initiated not only income tax, but the Federal Reserve System, which we've been on ever since, except for that short moment that Kennedy tried to take us off it. And it's even written in the Constitution that only the Treasury makes their own currency. How did we let a cabal of private bankers take over our money supply at interest? I mean, it's the biggest scam in the universe. And we fell for it, or because people were ignorant that it even happened, it was supplanted upon us, and now we're living with the consequences.
Now, the bankers, the banks that created the Federal Reserve, were they all U.S. banks or were they international banks?
Well, they're international banks, and here's where it gets really interesting, because still to this day, you cannot find who are the owners of the banks that own the various central banks. But it ties into the Rothschild banking dynasty. It also ties into the Vatican Bank, the IOR. So there are ties to old European royalty and old European money that got a hold of our monetary system in this country. And it's really the biggest scam perpetuated upon the American people.
Yeah, I just, the land of the free and home of the brave doesn't really cut it anymore because we're not. I mean, I'm not saying we're not brave, but...
Well, I call it the land of the thieves and home of the slave is more appropriate these days.
Well, you title of your book is, Escaping the Prison Planet. And it's funny because I thought, well, I'm free, but nobody is really free because we all have debt, and they encourage us to get further and further into debt with abandon, with reckless abandon. I mean, there was a time when I had a car accident. I had not been able to work for a number of years. I was really in debt. And and that was when American Express thought I was a great candidate for a silver American Express card, which, and this is where the mentality is not as good as I'd like it to be. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world, so I paid them the $200 on another credit card so I could get the silver American credit card. I mean, it's a downward slope that is horrible to get caught in, and it's almost impossible to not be in debt in some way, shape, or form. And that's how they keep us, slaving.
Yep, that's right. It's exactly how they do it. And the whole nature of the financial system that is creating money and then lending it to the federal government at interest, and this fractional reserve currency that the big banks use to create even more currency, you're just pulling this stuff out of thin air. That's why the value of a dollar has gone down 97% since the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. And it's called the Aldrich Act at the time because it was a senator that really pushed it through on Christmas Eve when they just needed the minimum amount of votes. I mean, everything about it was such a scam, including how they got the Act of 1871 through. So these bankers are very clever. They wait till the right moment, and then they get in there, and then they're just the octopus that just uses their tentacles and suckers to just grab onto their prey and never let go. And that's why, even though the Federal Reserve Act was only supposed to be for 99 years, what did they do in 2012? Extended it, I think, for another 100 years or at least 50 years. So we're stuck with it still. Because once they have the politicians corrupted, as they have been in this country with lobbyists, you can't break out of it anymore unless, once again, every institution we know of has to be taken down, dismantled, and then built back up in a transparent and honest and open way for everybody to see what it is. Because people don't believe in the systems anymore. All of our institutions are going through a major crisis at the moment in people's confidence. They don't think they work anymore, and they don't. And they do have to be dismantled and rebuilt, including the whole financial industry.
Yeah, I said to somebody I think it was today, I said, the government is going to have to fall in order for us to hopefully be able to build something up. But before that happens, somehow those powers that be, you spoke of the triumvirate of the Vatican and London and D.C., that's another aspect. I think many people don't understand that the City of London, Washington, D.C. itself, and the Vatican City are all independent nations, literally.
That's right. That's all part of it, too, Barbara. It's called the Empire of Three Cities. And Washington, D.C., notice how it's a district of Columbia, no senators, and it's not a state. But it has its own police force, its own laws, its own rules, separate. It's an empire of three cities, so it's a city-state within a larger nation. Similarly, the 1 square mile of all the banks in the City of London, and it's called that, City of London, is also the control of the money supply. And the Federal Reserve System in the UK, it was the very first central bank that was bought out by the private bankers. So that's been the model for all the other British Empire countries and most of the Western countries of the world. And then you have the Vatican City, its own nation state right in the center of Rome. Been there several times to all three of those locations. And the other commonality between the Empire of Three Cities is each one of them has a very large obelisk right in the center. So you have your occult symbolism right in the Empire of Three Cities. In Vatican Square, they have a giant obelisk that was taken out of Egypt. Another one is called Cleopatra's Needle right along the River Thames, is in the central part of the City of London, the 1 square mile area. And then, of course, in Washington, D.C., you have Washington's Monument, a giant obelisk that no building in D.C. is allowed to go taller than. That is the tallest structure in the city, the city-state. And so that's why everybody's saying drain the swamp. D.C. was actually, originally it was a swamp, and they did have to drain it to put Washington, D.C. in there. But the corruption is so deep that, once again, the only way to save it is to tear it down and build it up again. Like, was it Cali in the Vietnam War that said, "Why did you destroy that village?" "Well, there were Viet Cong there, sir, and we had to destroy the village in order to save it." That might be the only hope for Washington, D.C. at this point.
Well, there was a TV series called Designated Survivor, a couple of years ago, and in essence, the whole premise behind it was every time there is the speech the president gives each year, the Supreme Court is there, his cabinet is there, everybody's there, except there's one person that is not there just in case something happens to everybody else. There is somebody who can carry on the role of president. And in this series, that's what happens. The Capitol building is destroyed, everyone is killed, and this designated survivor becomes the president. And it was a very interesting series because it looked like it was the only way to set things right. And I'm not advocating blowing up the Capitol or anything like that. But I am saying that you talk about the corruption that is so integrated into every agency and every part of our government. It's like, how do you start to weed it out, because it's everywhere. It's not like you could say, well, this particular agency is clean and has no corruption. It's in everywhere. The more deeply you go into your book, you show all of the different places that have been corrupted, whether through bribery, through through, being corrupt, or having, and even politicians have to spend more time campaigning to get money for their campaigns than they do to actually work on the government that they're there to be a part of. It's made it impossible for anybody to be honest.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and this is the problem we find ourselves in, is that the way things have gone have just totally gamed the system, made the rich people richer, and the poor people poorer. And now we're seeing the middle class being squeezed out as well. So this is not sustainable. Form of government, form of finance, form of education. So many different institutions just need to go and be rethought. And now we're at this age where you're having robots enter the picture for manufacturing jobs and even automated drivers. And AI is coming into our home. Alexa, give me the weather report. I won't use that for sure, but a lot of people do, and it's not going anywhere. It's only going to become more and more invasive. So to hold our privacy and our way of life, it's all changing.
Well, now you talk about the new fascism, and that term fascist and fascism has been literally thrown around a great deal in the last 3 to 4 years. This is fascist, that's fascist. It will be interesting. Explain what the old fascism was, and then show how it's taken place in our government.
Sure, because the first chapter and the section is called neo-fascism, the new fascism. So then what was the old fascism? Well, back when you and I were in school, we learned that Mussolini termed the word and was original fascist. Adolf Hitler was as well. The merging of government with corporations is the textbook definition of fascism. But the new fascism, it's the other way around. Now you have heads of corporation that are buying and paying for our judges, politicians, DAs, NGOs, and so many others. So the new fascism is the corporatocracy that has taken over government, rather than the other way around. Under Mussolini and Hitler, it was government taking over the corporations. So now we have all these unelected officials behind smoky boardroom doors that are making decisions that affect all the rest of us. And because they have government, judges, and to a degree militaries in their pocket, they wield extraordinary power over the rest of us. Almost every country in the world has succumbed to these corporatists in the form of, say, a little banana republic. There's a great book about the robber barons, the corporate raiders who would go around. They're called economic hitmen. And they would go to these smaller banana republics and basically enrich the president and the few people to get in the door, say, we're going to give you all this money for your infrastructure, but what it really was for our corporations to come in there and get paid that money to pump their oil and exploit their resources. So these smaller countries just got trampled over and really abused by American imperialism. We used to always think when we were in school that imperialism was the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. They have so many colonies all the way around the world. There's always something going on. And, of course, all those countries were being exploited. But you think of American imperialism, we're just America, but we've got military bases in, 156 countries? And that is our form of imperialism, through the corporatocracy, through these corporations amassing even more and more power and holding all these small countries in lockstep and saying, you need more money because you're going broke. You have to service the loan with interest. We'll give you another loan, but you have to vote with us on a certain thing on the UN, or you have to allow this other corporation to come in and build another oil refinery. It's things like that. And so these countries just get so saddled in debt and dig a hole that they can't get out of and throw in a kleptomaniac president that just steals it and puts it in a Cayman Islands account and runs out of the country, and it just screws that country even more. So no wonder they are so reluctant to get involved or bring the U.S. in anymore. In fact, many countries want to get America out, including Japan wants to get our military base out of Okinawa. They've wanted to do that for years, but they have protests there to get them out. But we won't leave, right? Because we got an agreement with the Japanese government, and they feel like they need the balance of power against China or Russia. And so the globalists are always pitting country against country because it's very profitable to do so. Eisenhower warned us about the growing power of the military-industrial economy in 1960, and it has gotten so worse and so much more out of hand in those years since then that we're just up against this behemoth. And that's what has so much power all around the world, that it's so hard to try to take this monster down. But I've always said that the revolution is consciousness. And it's us waking up, because once you see what they're up to, well, we can practice what Martin Luther King and Gandhi did, and that is noncompliance. Don't go along with their system and make fun of them. They don't know how to deal with sarcasm or humor that's directed at them, say in the form of memes that show how ridiculous some things are in the economy or with the pandemic, and basically a free meme that gets picked up around the world that shows the absurdity of some of these things go counter to these billion-dollar industries that are trying to influence us one way or another. So we can fight back doing this nonviolently, but we're up against the big one here.
Well, when you look at, the big corporations and you go right to the top, you find that it's almost the same families, companies that are at the top, so that the majority of the wealth of the world is owned by a very small number of organizations, and it's frightening how they control so much. And I mean, big pharma. When I look at it, and it's just me, and I don't speak for anybody but me. It just seems as though there are cures out there that I know for sure. There are cures out there for so many different illnesses that corporations have bought up the patents and won't share it with the public, because they want the public to be, they want the public to have to come to them for the drugs that they're selling, so that they're not going to do anything that's going to in any way help humanity. They're here to control humanity. I mean, I can't tell you the number of advertisements for different medications that are on the television every day. I mean, illnesses I never heard of. They're, if you have this, then, tell your doctor you want this. And the doctors just give it to you. So it's frightening. I mean, what our country has become is frightening. So you want to sit back and you want to say, wait a minute, how do we make changes? How do we in any way get our power back? I look at all of the things that are going on in this world, and all I can think of is, what can I do? And I'm doing what I can do. I'm putting information out there. I'm helping to educate the public. But, you want to do more because you see what's happening and you see how people are getting swallowed up in stuff. And with that comes depression. And with that depression comes that negative attitude. And that shuts everything down. And then the person doesn't have the connection to the spirit they carry within them to fight this stuff.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. There's another whole system, industry, pharmaceuticals and medicine that needs to be collapsed and brought up and trained and learned anew. When did natural immunity become a bad word? How come we don't see commercials on TV to go eat an apple? Instead, they sell cheeseburgers for 99 cents, and an apple costs more in a supermarket. So everything's backwards. Everything we're being told, oh, it's so good and yummy. Yeah, well, nobody ever said junk food didn't taste good, but it's terrible for you. And that's why we have such an obesity and diabetic dilemma in this country. If you look at old pictures, even pictures from Woodstock or pictures from the 1950s, people on the beach without a shirt on, wearing bathing suits, you hardly ever see anybody with even just like a beer belly. Everybody is so thin and fit and looking good and eating healthy back then. It's just been another drag on people having these just terrible information about what they should be putting into their body.
Well, you talk about a new fascism. And, you've taken it one step further, and it really, it was chilling, the things that the power, you talk about a one world government, and that's what those people who are the manipulators, the puppet masters, so to speak, that's what they're aiming towards. That's what they're hoping for. And in order to get that one world government, they have to really have the populace, the masses, in control. And the things that they are doing to get us in control, to me, are frightening. Because, they're first of all, they've been doing it for so long, it's hard to undo what they've done. The chemtrails with spreading the chemicals and all of the things that they've been spreading on the populace and the fields and everything for decades now. The poison is there. How do you how Brad, do you fight the fact that it's in the air, it's in the soil, it's in the food you eat? How do you fight that?
Well, you have to detox virtually every day of your life because we are being so overloaded with, as you say, things that are coming down in the chemtrails. I'm out here on the coast, Barbara. I'm less than a mile away from the Pacific Ocean, and there are no main roads around here, and there's no pollution, no factories or anything. Yet my car, within days after they've been spraying the sky, is filthy. Where's all this pollution coming from? Well, it's coming from the air because they are moving weather systems around. One of the chapters in Beyond Esoteric, in fact, it's the final chapter in the neo-fascism section, is geoengineering. And people absolutely have to understand that our weather is being controlled. There is a document called Weather as a Force Multiplier that came out by the Air Force in 1996. And it was talking about how they're modifying the weather to own the weather in 2025, this document says. And I would encourage any of your listeners to go to weathermodificationhistory.com. That's just one word, Weather Modification History. And look at this website because they have done a great job cultivating all the different news stories all the information over the years about geoengineering, from cloud seeding to ionospheric heaters to cloud ionizers to geoengineering. Very invaluable resource for anyone who still doesn't understand what this is or denies that it's going on. If you look at this website or my geoengineering chapter in Beyond Esoteric, it should go beyond a shadow of a doubt this is being done to us. Then you have, as you say, how do we fight this? Well, you've got what's coming down in the air. You've got pesticides and GMO foods, the soil, and corrupted seeds. And you also have fluoride in the water. So it's literally air, land, and sea are all polluted. So what do we have to do? We have to detoxify every day. I'll give you a couple of my tips. I just do really love to drink coffee, but I realize it's an acidic drink if just drank by itself. So I learned a little trick, and that is putting just a sprinkle of baking powder on the coffee when it brews. You don't even taste it if you make a whole pot of it with just a sprinkling of baking soda, and you turn an acidic drink into an alkaline drink. So part of our detoxing is to make our bodies more alkaline. And I do cover this in Beyond Esoteric as well as in Modern Esoteric about tricks we can do to detoxify ourselves. The other thing I do in my morning coffee is put a little scoop of diatomaceous earth, which is kind of clay and it's really not that good, but in a nice milky coffee, after a cup or two, you drink it down, and you can take diatomaceous earth, which is great for scrubbing the inside and getting toxins out of the intestine. The old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Apples are not known for their nutritional value, but they're very good for scrubbing the insides of our intestines and helping our body to remove the toxins. And so this is the whole concept of the bioterrain, the inner terrain, which is the first line of defense. The immune system actually comes in later if something starts going wrong and they have to start bombarding something with the red blood cells and going after it. But the bioterrain is really what is so important. And this is where things went awry with the medical community. There was a big debate in the 19th century. I described this in my chapter called The Terrain, the Bioterrain in Beyond Esoteric. Big debate in the late 19th century between Louis Pasteur, the founder of pasteurization, and his detractors. And there are several other scientists, medical doctors who said, wait, hold on. Pasteur said one germ, one cure. A germ causes disease. We got to attack the germ. Well, look, Barbara, if humans were so vulnerable to germs and bacteria and everything that we come in contact with every day, the human race would have been gone a long, long time ago. So our body has a way of handling this. But you have to have a really strong body, for one, an inner terrain that is generally more on the alkaline side and rock solid, ready to take on any diseases. That's why I never get a flu shot. Guess what? I haven't had the flu in 30 years, since about the last time I got a flu shot. So I just opt out of all that, and I think I'm all the better as a result. But I do things like, and I exercise daily, and I got a little one-person infrared sauna that I sit in every night too, and that as well is detoxifying through sweating. So there's many things like this that we can do to help our bodies detox, and as a result, we'll live a healthier and longer life. And we don't even have to take that poisonous allopathic medicine at all. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. was saying all the way back to the ancient Greeks. I think it was Hippocratic himself, who doctors take the Hippocratic oath when they become a doctor, and that is, do no harm to your patients.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another one that got turned upside down on its head, isn't it? That you see a lot of harm coming out of the medical industry. And then in the top 10 reasons for death, one of them is medical malpractice. They check into a hospital and get something else worse, and sometimes kills them. So I try to stay out of a hospital at all costs.
Oh yeah, even to visit, I don't like to go. You mentioned earlier weather, and I can remember when HARP was initially put up in where was it? Alaska, yeah. And they were saying it was going to help to control the weather and prevent things and everything else. And as with every invention that I have ever heard of, the first thing that people ask after it's initiated is, how can we turn it into a weapon? And
right.
I truly believe that the Haiti tsunami was caused by HARP. I truly believe that a lot of the fireflies and firefires in California are caused by HARP. I do believe that they are using it to manipulate weather, to use weather as a weapon, as opposed to helping it to bring, rain to where we need it, and to balance out things. If HARP was that good, why was it not used to sway the hurricanes that have done such horrible damage, and the typhoons on the other side of in the Pacific? I mean, from what you were saying, it also emits a tone, a frequency that in many ways will be there are little aluminum pieces of aluminum that are being dropped to us in the chemtrails, and
right.
If we're breathing them, if they're into us, and if HARP uses the right frequency, they can wipe all of us out in a heartbeat. So that it's an amazing weapon, and I don't see them using it for good anywhere. I don't see them using it to break droughts. I don't see them using it to get firefires over, to get thunderstorms over fires. I don't see any positive use for HARP that has happened in the last 20 years.
Unless it's weather warfare, and then it's, well, the Chinese have it, the Russians have it. If we don't have it, then they're going to use it against us, and we can't get them back. So we need it as a deterrent. That's the military's way of thinking. One of my colleagues in the field, Nick Begich, wrote a book called Angels Don't Play That Harp. I love that title.
Yeah.
And he's up in Alaska, and he's been to Guernica, and there's another site that they have these big HARP antennas, which for your listeners who aren't aware of what it does, they're giant microwave ovens, basically. The real technical term is ionospheric heaters. And so there's a level in the atmosphere called the ionosphere, and they can direct the HARP energy weapons with this microwave, just like a microwave oven heats up your meal. They can heat up parts of the ionosphere and steer where they're putting those rays up. Now they have HARP arrays that are even on platforms like oil derricks, but can move around. And they also have mobile HARP arrays that can move around on land. So you're absolutely right. Every hurricane has been directed into this country for a reason. And I think they're trying to destabilize America in different kind of ways. They're forcing the drought on us out here in the West. Other parts of the country have been flooded. Wherever you're vulnerable, they can use the HARP machine. And in the patent, it even said that it can trigger earthquakes. And Maybe why we're seeing an uptick in earthquakes around the world too. Maybe we're doing it to countries like Iran or China, Russia. They're doing it back to us. I'm not sure.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if the New Madrid fault line goes, has earthquakes again. If the New Madrid line is activated again, that will literally split the country.
Oh, yes, it will. And people who have communicated with future Earth and the maps of North America show the Mississippi Valley being very vast, 100 miles across. Do you remember Ed Bielik? He was one of the brothers who jumped off the Philadelphia experiment. Well, he stayed in the programs a lot longer than his brother, Duncan Cameron, but both of them used to come to conferences, and there's some old videos you can watch. Well, Al Bielik, he actually went ahead in time to, I think, around 2150, so maybe 130 years from now, but he did that a couple decades ago. And he said that he was in a very clinical setting for a few days before he came back, but he had enough time to kind of gauge where America was at. And we had gone through a great catastrophe. The New Madrid fault line had ruptured. It drained the Great Lakes, but it created a giant chasm in the middle of this country that the ocean then came back and filled up. And Al Bielik was saying that the big news story of the day in 2150 is they had just finished the 100-mile causeway to connect the two basically sides of the North American continent, which had split in half. And that was the big monumental achievement for cars to be able to drive across that bridge. But the planet had been grossly depopulated too, was another thing that he noticed, that I think it was down to only 1 billion or 1.5 billion, and we're at close to 9 billion today. So something happens, whether it's a depopulation agenda or perhaps this pole shift or Earth changes kind of scenario where just a lot of people perished.
Well, every year I predict that the New Madrid line is going to go off again, and it doesn't. So I now I do it intentionally because I'm in Nashville, so I'm real close to that fault line.
Oh, yes, you are.
All I can think of is I could have waterfront property.
Do you ever feel any of the earthquakes? Because it's a very active zone, but they're very low on the Richter scale measured earthquakes.
Haven't felt any earthquakes yet, knock on wood, but certainly I have been in on the East Coast, so nor'easters and hurricanes I'm very used to. I love them actually. But tornadoes are something that I am frightened of, and so I'm in a place where, I think 5 or 6 times since I've been here, there's been that warning that goes out that's take cover immediately, and you go to the center of your house and you sit there with your flashlight and your cat and whatever and a blanket hopefully, and you wait to make sure that your house doesn't blow away. So that's a new experience for me. Yeah, it's just a little scary.
You get that all the way to Nashville?
Yeah.
Wow.
We've had 5 so far, and one did touch down within a half mile of my house. And so it does happen.
Kentucky and Southern Illinois got racked by a big one a couple months ago.
Oh yeah, it went hundreds of miles. I wanted to ask another. Want to ask another question about HARP. I know that at one time they were concerned about the ozone layer, and I don't know if they tried to pierce holes through it to kind of fix it or whatever with HARP, but did they actually set off a number of nuclear bombs up there to try to open up the ozone layer?
Yeah, they sure did. That was called Alternative 1. And I have a chapter in Beyond Esoteric called Alternative 1, Alternative 2, Alternative 3. Alternative 1, yeah, these great minds of the think tanks of the 1950s said, our atmosphere is getting so polluted, let's blow off nuclear bombs down near Antarctica to let all the pollution escape. And they did. And that's Operation Argus. Now, there could be a real other reason behind that. Now, I don't doubt that they did something as stupid as blowing up high-altitude nuclear bombs that created the ozone holes. But Operation Argus is still a classified nuclear testing operation. And I think they were lobbing a couple of nukes at the New Schwabenland, the German claim in Antarctica, in the late 1950s. Because shortly after that came out with the Antarctica Treaty, which specifically stated there will be no nuclear testing on the continent of Antarctica, almost as if to say, we did it once, but now we're outlawing it for all the rest of you. So that's a big question about whether Alternative 1 was really about blowing holes in the upper atmosphere to let the pollution escape, or to really get back at the New Schwabenland Nazis for defeating Admiral Byrd in the Battle of High Jump in early 1947. So Alternative 2 is going underground. That's the deep underground military bases in which in North America or in the U.S. on the lower 48, there's at least 130 of these underground bases. Massive in size, multi-levels. Like the one under the Denver International Airport goes down 8 levels, and it could house, I think, 1.5 million people. Of course, all the elite and their families, none of us are invited. But their whole thinking with these think tank scenarios in the 1950s is the Earth's surface is screwed. We got to get out of here. And Alternative 3 was going off planet, and that was building up bases on the moon as a way station to go out to the larger bases on Mars. And there I have evidence in this chapter that we did exactly that. Now, there was a TV show that came out in the 1970s called Alternative 3, and it was kind of like a 60-minute science show in the UK, and it aired only one time. And it was supposed to air in the U.S., and they canceled it, and it aired one time in Australia. But it created such a ruckus because it was so believable. It was kind of like the War of the Worlds radio show with Orson Welles in the late 1930s of an alien invasion that just sounded so real, because there are elements in truth of both of those. But this Alternative 3 TV show, and you can still watch it on YouTube, talked about all these scientists who left Earth to go work in these colonies off planet. And people were calling in the show and said, oh, my scientist brother-in-law, he split 5 years ago. Is he in the programs? And they were just inundated with these calls of people that believed it was real. And I think elements of it really were real. And this is what now the super soldiers, or the people in the 20 and back programs who are going through the military programs and then are recruited to do some of the off-planet stuff, are coming back and saying, yeah, there's a breakaway civilization at this point of humans who do not live on the Earth anymore, that are even having children that are being born off-planet. That's what is known as the breakaway civilization. That's Alternative 3.
Well, part of the 20 and back is that they're supposedly they wipe your memory. Are they not doing that anymore?
No, they are, but now these guys are finding ways to go to hypnotherapy and other ways to retrieve their memories. And my friend Tony Rodriguez, who lived off planet a number of years, has written a whole book on the Ceres colony and his time spent there. Randy Kramer has also written a book about his 20 and back on Mars and other locations within our solar system. It's not just the moon and the Mars. It's also the Ceres planetoid within the asteroid belt. And Randy Kramer speaks about going to a very small moon-like, more like a large meteorite outside of Jupiter. And they have bases in them.
Mary Joyce, who has that wonderful website, Skyships Over Cashiers, has discovered that there is not only Google Earth, but there's Google Mars and there's Google Moon. And
both.
She has found all sorts of I guess certainly things that denote that there was a civilization there at one time. And what's fascinating is she will talk about them, talk about them, and give you the GPS. And by the time somebody goes there, it's been changed. It's definitely been airbrushed out or whatever. She had a whole bunch of stuff in Antarctica, which showed villages, the outlines of them, and certainly where there had been dwellings and things like that. And she had that posted, and by the time people went there, it had been airbrushed. So
wow.
What's fascinating is she actually has some pictures. She now takes screenshots when she finds these places. But with Mars, she's found a number of places where a ship of any sort could fly into them, their entrances. And if you check out her website, they're all there. The pictures are all there, and they are fabulous. And she gives you the GPS. You can go up and look for yourself. So the fact that Mars and the Moon have been certainly colonized is there. I mean, it's inside, but you can see the entrances, and it's spectacular. And so this is very much like UFOs. Our government said we weren't ready. It would create panic if the general public in the United States knew about them, so they hid it off from us. And they're still hiding it, but we all know about it. And so
right.
The fact that we have colonies on the Moon and Mars should be something that we should all be very excited about. I mean, they were signing people up to take part in a while ago, maybe within the last year, that they were literally taking volunteers to go for the first Mars colony, but it's already there. And it's
right.
sort of like Trump started the space program, but the secret space program has been out there for decades.
Yeah, it sure has. And I reproduce images in my esoteric series of books. Future Esoteric has a bunch of off-planet images, as well as in Beyond Esoteric. Yeah, it's really unmistakable that perfect right angles, pyramids in the case of Mars, the lights that come out of craters on the moon, and what they saw on the dark side of the moon, the side that never faces Earth, that's really where all the obvious bases are, including the base that our secret space program set up decades ago called the Luna base that William Cooper spoke of. And that was the way station to head on out to Mars. Now, it's really interesting. You mentioned Google Mars and Google Moon, and also Google Earth for Antarctica, is all of a sudden, just in the last month or so, has started to reveal quite a bit. And they're taking off the masking on some of these sensitive locations. Dr. Michael Sala had a whistleblower that told him the GPS coordinates in Antarctica, in the New Schwabenland area of the German claim, of a base of all these symmetrical lines and runways and things like this on a mesa in Antarctica. And also, if you look around Area 51 in Nevada, just north of Las Vegas, the best kept secret everybody knows, Area 51, right? But all of a sudden, they will put an identification and show you the bay doors of S4. the base that Bob Lazar worked at, and described exactly as you can now see on Google Earth. So Bob Lazar has been vindicated in so many more ways than one, and this being just another cause. But it's interesting that they're now starting to show a lot more, or taking down the masking, because so many times I've been scouring over or going on a lead with some GPS and looking at Antarctica, only to find a very obvious white screen put over something. So, for example, you can't see the giant hole in the ice 1 degree off the South Pole. Yeah, it's even sloppy. Like you just see a big square white over the contours of the ice. They're not even making an effort to try to blend that in. They're just like, yeah, we're not showing you that. But
well,
it's starting to open up.
Isn't there a no-fly zone there over a lake that is that is there?
So there is a lake. Yeah, it's called Lake Vostok. It's one of the top 10 largest freshwater lakes in the world that nobody's ever heard of, because it's 2 miles under the ice. But that's at the Vostok base, which is a few hundred miles away from the South Pole. The actual giant no-fly zone is right near the North Pole at about 89 parallel south.
No, North or South Pole?
South Pole.
Okay.
Yeah, near the South Pole. North Pole is the Arctic region with water underneath. Antarctica has the continental landmass underneath 2 miles of ice, and that's where Lake Vostok is. But this no-fly zone is near the South Pole at 89 degrees south, the South Pole being 90 degrees south. So about 100 miles or so from the South Pole station. And it was interesting that Prince Harry, back when all the celebrities and royal family members and other politicians were going down to the South Pole, remember, in 2015, 2016 timeframe. John Kerry was there during the election. So Prince Harry goes down there around that time frame too. And he goes to the South Pole, and him and his army buddies set off over the polar plateau cross-country skiing, just going to the 89th degree parallel. I think they were going to see the big hole in the ice, which is nicknamed the Illuminati Disneyland. And it is a gaping hole in the ice that's so big that it can be seen from outer space, but not on Google Earth because they mask it. But it's so big that Admiral Byrd, in his diary, who's also a master aviator, he flew over the South Pole and saw the gaping hole, and it was so big he felt confident enough to drop the plane into the hole with enough room to circle around and come back out. And that's where the no-fly zone is. And that's where all the masking is still currently on Google Earth.
I still believe that there is a colony of Nazis there. I don't believe. I mean, it feels as though it's large and fully functional, and independent of Germany for sure, but connected probably to those that are still Fourth Reich oriented that are here in this country and in Brazil.
Well, yeah, that's right. And as you know, the last time I was on your show, I was telling you about my trip down to Antarctica 3 years ago. It wasn't anywhere near the New Schwabenland claim, but if I were to ever go back, that is where I would like to go. And I'm fairly certain I know where the New Berlin base was located. And I'd go down there with Geiger counters to see if we could detect some of the radiation that would be left over if indeed Operation Argus was about bombing with nuclear bombs this base. There'd still be some residue of radioactivity, and that would make for a very interesting show. But that's where the Germans set up their base.
Well, if you stop and think about it, World War II ended 40-something. It's been, 60, 70, 80 years. If they exported a lot of their scientists to that area, and the scientists have had the last 80 years to work on developing or reverse engineering some of the UFO stuff, I mean, it would seem to me that they're probably leagues ahead of everybody else with their technology and staying quiet on purpose for a reason.
Yeah, that's right. And if you consider the end of World War II, the Allies were absolutely terrified of the German wonder weapons that they were going to supposedly unleash on the Allied forces moving towards Germany, including nuclear bombs. A lot of the paperclip Nazis that came over right at the end of the war, some of them were nuclear physicists that helped us in the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bombs that we dropped on Japan to end World War II. So they were very advanced in that department, let alone their advancements with disc-shaped technology. And there was a big data dump in the 1990s. An anonymous donor just gave all this material to a British researcher who put it out there as is, and I reproduced some of the blueprints of the Honeyboo craft in Beyond Esoteric to give people an idea how advanced the Germans were 80 years ago. Yeah, but they had help, and that was the quote of Hermann Oberth, who was one of the paperclip Nazis with Werner von Braun that came over here to help start up NASA. And when people would ask them, where did Germany come up with all this incredible technology 80 years ago? And he would say, well, we had help from the people from above, meaning ET technology. But the German engineers were masters at backward engineering. So they had their own downed craft, a UFO that crashed in the Black Forest region in Bavaria that the German engineers got their hands on. Not only that, but Mussolini had a nearly intact craft that came down the Lombardy region in the 1930s that he turned over to the German engineers. That combined with the psychic mediums from the Vril Society that were telepathically downloading blueprints for zero-point energy craft, free energy devices, and giant motherships that, of course, the Third Reich was very eager to get their hands on and also incorporate that into their backward engineering. So the Germans had an incredible head start, way ahead of anyone else, and it's no wonder that the Allies were so afraid of them. And then you have what were known as Foo Fighters, these balls of plasma that would follow our Allied pilots on their bombing raids and really scared them, but it didn't take them down. I don't know if the Foo Fighters were strictly ET technology that was just following the war, because you would think that the Germans would want to take down the ships, these planes coming in to bomb Germany, but they rarely ever did. To my knowledge, I don't think they ever did.
Well, maybe they weren't weaponized.
They just weren't weaponized. Yeah, maybe they were just like for spying and seeing it. And that's what they were using. Their first craft, their first disc-shaped craft were seen by the Allies over the Battle of Kursk, which was the largest tank battle ever fought outside of Moscow in 1943. And they had one of their discs hovering in the sky just observing the battle line formations. They didn't want to get it too close that it might get shot down and lose that technology. Because when the Russians were the first to get to the Eastern Front, and there was their laboratory where they did a lot of their backward engineering was called the Skoda Works in what is today the Czech Republics. And they didn't find any of these plans. That had all been taken out, all the craft had been taken out, and almost all of the scientists were gone, except those that had a bullet in their head, presumably because they didn't want to evacuate to Antarctica. And that's where the backward engineering programs went after the war. So a little bit of history that a lot of people don't know about, because history is definitely an esoteric subject that gets written by the victors, as Napoleon said. Or as Voltaire, the French philosopher, said, is the Mississippi of lies, that history is just so replete with inaccuracies. But the last two battles of World War II in the European campaign were won by Germany. But it was too embarrassing for the Allies to admit that the final battle of World War II was actually a submarine battle in the North Atlantic, that the Germans just routed the Allied ships and escaped down to South America and Antarctica in their fleet of the convoy of the large, sort of like a container ship, but submarines. They could fit containers inside some of these larger convoys, and this is the Führer convoy that was the final big trip down. And still to this day, there are dozens, if not over 100, U-boat submarines that are still unaccounted for, that just were out in the ocean somewhere and never came back. Nobody knows where they went. Well, I think I know where they went.
Well, yeah. I think one of the things that has always confused me a little bit, there are pictures of Maria Orsich, which is one of the mediums that work with the Vril Society. They showed a picture of her to Billy Meyer, and he recognized her as one of the first people that had come to teach him about the other side and the other world when he was much younger. And I tried to compare dates, and that was earlier than World War II. So apparently Maria was his teacher and visited him, in a spaceship and talked to him and taught him prior to then manifesting herself as a psychic medium during World War II to help the Germans. So same person. He identified her, absolutely.
Isn't that interesting? Because the Germans also had another technological breakthrough, and that was what they called Die Glocke, or the bell, because this device was shaped like a bell, and I actually have a photograph of it in Beyond Esoteric, of the bell, which not only had the ability to manipulate the gravity around it, as UFOs do, but this particular craft could also transcend through time. So it was a time machine. So Maria Orsich very conceivably could have been that teacher to Billy Meyer 2 or 3 decades later.
Interesting. I know that they were doing, and again, here they were using technology that could have benefited humanity, and
right.
And it's not. And I would think that the development of an invention like any of these would have been of greater benefit to humanity, and not saying how can we use it as a weapon, but how can we help humanity with this. The whole basis of our civilization, as far as those who are in power, maybe power is the bad thing. Maybe nobody should have the power. Power can be used in a positive way or a negative way, and we haven't seen it used positively yet, which is horrifying.
That's a really good point. Power corrupts, absolutely, and absolute power corrupts, as the saying goes. And everybody in these positions, these moneyed elites, all they want is more power or control. and therein lies the problem.
Well, especially in our country, because unfortunately, even if we had a powerful person in charge of the country, they wouldn't have let it go to such disarray as it is in now. I mean, the point of it being, controlling it and making it a prosperous place for everyone to live in, and
Right.
it's not, and it just, and I don't want to get into politics, but the reality is that I mean, we even made corporations people so that they could hold office. Now, is that stupid or what?
The Citizens
almost,
United ruling. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I mean, it's almost like, who was it that made his horse a member of Congress, a Greek? Was it, oh, come on, it was, I forget which crazy emperor it was, but he made his horse a member of their parliament or whatever, and it was of course he had the power to, but that's almost like what we're doing. These people, these corporations have control, and so, well, let's make them people so they can hold office, and that means that one of these corporations could be elected president.
Wow.
Right?
Well, as we said, there's so many things that just need to be dismantled and then reworked because, ever since the Citizens United ruling of the Supreme Court that corporations had the same rights as humans, I thought, oh boy, everything is backwards now. If that could be passed by the Supreme Court, is just
oh God, Mark, that could happen, Brad. That could happen. I mean, it's so crazy these days. I don't think it would, but then you stop and think, does my vote count for anything? Because we've seen how they've been cheating with the voting, so it's sort of like, so after all of this, and I know it all sounds a little depressing, and it is kind of, but it's part of the process of getting to a point where we have to take apart to put together to build better. How do we as individuals start to fight this? I mean, we can fight it. One voice will do it, so long as it's a lot of one voices. So how do we start? How do we start to work against this kind of a tsunami of control? Laughing at them and not participating and stuff like that, that's cool too, but there have to be ways that we can individually fight this and fight our own battle. So is
I think the
development?
only way to do it, the only way to do it peacefully, non-violently, is just to non-participation, not watching the corporate news anymore, not giving it any of your attention, not supporting these corporations that are doing a lot of nasty things to the people. It's a good question, and in some ways it sounds like a cop-out because I know a lot of people are getting pretty upset with what's going on and certain effects of what they might have injected into their bodies.
Uh-huh.
And there's going to be a lot of angry people when some of this truth starts coming out. But to me, I have to advocate nonviolence, and I think the only way to do it is this noncompliance. Don't go along with the plan.
Well, that's certainly one thing that there are lots of ways of doing it, and I think that's one way that everybody should to the best of their ability do. But also, we have a weapon that is as powerful as they come, and that's our consciousness. That's our spirit. That's our connection to the source, and we have the ability to utilize that as well. Not in a way of making it a weapon at all, but the greater the awareness, the less effect they will have on us. And so by developing and working on our own consciousness, expanding it, sharing with it, getting together with other people, and not talking about what's being done to us, but what we can do to us to enhance ourselves so that this doesn't affect us so much. So that it's sort of helping our generation to move to another level of understanding so that they see through the lies and the deceit and the manipulation. And once you see through it, it doesn't have any effect. It only has effect if we're paying attention to it. And the other thing is that is so important is that they have more power when the masses are in fear. And fear is an amazing thing. And if you can go beyond fear, if you can go into understanding and not let fear rule you, then they have no control. They only control us because we're afraid. And the minute we're not afraid, and again, peacefully understanding what they're doing and being able to look at them and say, you're lying. That's not so.
Right.
And I'm not going to react to it. You don't look at a fire and somebody say, don't stick your hands in it. Don't stick your hand in it. But I mean, there's a certain level of understanding and consciousness that all of us are capable of getting to. And if you let the fear rule you, then you are again cannon fodder for them. And I prefer to not be cannon fodder. I'd rather be able to see through what they're doing.
Yeah. I think I'm going to avoid being cannon fodder too. That's good advice. But yeah, we got to see through what's going on, and that's why understanding these subjects we're talking about tonight, the esoteric, is so vital for people to comprehend because it can affect your life. Just as we were talking about the food being poisoned or the chemtrails in the air or fluoride in the water, you got to know what you're up against to be able to counter it and give yourself a better chance to survive all this stuff, because it's an assault. We are being, the screws are being tightened at all ends on us here. It seems like we're just in the fight for our lives sometimes.
Well, in many ways we are, but it's, we are a family of man. And what I find fascinating is that out there, beyond the planet, there are space fleets that are manned by people of all nations. It isn't that we take the pettiness here and we put it in space. It feels as though the programs that are out there, I mean, there are some, there are good guys and bad guys everywhere, let's face it. But it feels to me as though some of the off-world stuff is more of a blend of people than a nation here and a nation there. It's not like the Arctic where the Americans have one little hut and the Russians have another little hut and the Germans have a big hut. And it's not like that. It's those that have gone off-world are blended not only with other cultures, religions, philosophies from the planet, but also with others that are non-terrestrial, so that there's more of a camaraderie, there's more of a working together off planet than there is on planet. At least that's my concept of it.
Yeah, and that's the big alien question. I like the Bill Cooper quote that he gave at the UFO Congress in 1989, his first talk. He was so impassioned in that talk. You still see it's a grainy video on YouTube, but the audio is perfect. And he said, you put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers. And you really have to if you want the big picture here. because they do play a role, and there is exopolitics, what's going on off planet and what our relationship is with them. And these things can't be kept secret forever. We're going to have to come to terms as a human race what we're up against here. And it's big. It's
I think there's an arrogance. There's an absolute arrogance with science, especially thinking that we're the top of the food chain, and I don't mean by being eaten, but we're the most intelligent and evolved in the universe, because we're not. And to be open to the fact that there's a lot more to learn, and there are cultures and species out there that have been around maybe even longer than us. I think the fact that our DNA is older than the planet, which means that human DNA came from somewhere else, and it would be interesting to know where home really was. And I think one of the things that has bugged me for now years is that 23andMe and Ancestry.com, they've all done DNA things to sort of tell you where you originated on this planet. But I don't believe that's what it was for. I believe they are looking for DNA. And when they came to, the testing for COVID, they were nose swabs, but they were getting our DNA as well. I think they're looking for something, and I don't know what.
Oh, they're collecting everybody's DNA. And the reason why is because even if you don't have the graphene oxide or the other things that came with the jab, if they have your DNA, every life form, much like every bit of matter, has a resonant frequency. So that's a very general example, is how a opera singer can shatter a wine glass with her voice.
Uh-huh.
Well, on a micro level, and this goes for every human being, much as we have a very unique fingerprint, or the iris of our eyeball is unique to every one of us, different in a little way, so is our resonant frequency. And if somebody gets our DNA into a database to punish that person, they can hit them with frequencies that are specific only to that person, because it's picking up on their resonant frequency through their DNA match. So this is where we're getting into some real dark science and a control grid using technology that's never been done before and never been unleashed upon an unsuspecting population as it is now. Again, this is why people really have to understand this stuff to know what we're up against. I mean, we're at a point now where this is a matter of self-defense. We have to protect ourselves because we are getting hit and assaulted from all sides. And if you don't even see it coming, you're going to get walloped by it.
Well, it's best to be prepared. It's sort of like, you carry extra batteries so that your flashlight doesn't go dark. You hopefully have a spare tire in your car if you have a flat. And I think understanding just the kind of things that are going on out there gives you a little bit of protection. Now, there are some things they'll be hard to cope with, and some things you can't avoid, and some, there are going to be things, but you do what you can with what you've got. And I don't think most of us have done all we can with what we've got. Certainly, addressing, a different kind of diet is a good idea. Exercise is a good idea. I mean, there's so many things that you can do that will improve your well-being and your health and your life. And not only that, but they expand your consciousness. I'm old, and I think my brain is sharper than it was when I was 30, and that's because I'm using it. they've done all sorts of studies with people in nursing homes, and some people that just sit and watch TV, and other people they challenge with video games and all sorts of puzzles and things like that. And after a period of time, they tested everybody, and they found those people that were using their minds had more vitality. They had better eye-hand coordination. They were just sharper. So the old saying, use it or lose it. It applies. I have a good friend who was a scientist, and her name is on a whole bunch of patents and stuff. But when she stopped working, she stopped thinking, and she just absolutely wasted away. And I think that can happen to all of us. And I think it's important that we keep challenging ourselves, whether it's learning a new language or learning a new talent or learning a new gift or using their creativity. I mean, it all helps to get that connection with the infinite more secure within us. And when you have that, you have hope and you have foresight and you have light in your life. And no matter what you're faced with, you're going to be able to handle it. I'll get off my soapbox.
Oh, it's a good soapbox to be on. Yeah, and that's what we're up against. That's the zeitgeist of the ages. And like Dickens wrote in the Tale of Two Cities, the book starts out, it was the best of time and it was the worst of time. And we have to identify what is the best and what is the worst and how to mitigate the damage done by the worst. And so we can just live a healthy, happy, and free life for the rest of our years on this short lifetime on planet Earth before our souls depart and our memory gets swiped, and maybe we got to come back and learn our karmic lessons all over again if we didn't get it right this time. So it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it, Barbara?
It does.
The
That's
more
my
you learn,
comfort,
the more you
though.
got to.
I every now and then I look at something and I say, I will do this next lifetime. I'm not going to play with it this lifetime. I'm rolling it over. And I think
I'm ready to get out of here. I think I want to leave Earth. This is a prison planet. I'm not from here. I came down for this mission. I'll help out for the rest of my life. And I've had a great life, and I've got to explore the planet, and it's very familiar. I know I've had many lifetimes here. The first time I realized it was when I went to Europe backpacking right out of college in 1988. And I got to the Roman city of Pompeii outside of Naples that was covered by the Mount Vesuvius volcanic eruption. I think the year was 79 AD, and it just covered the city in a few days with ash and mud. Now they've started digging out some of the larger sections, although much of Pompeii is still underground and is still yet to be excavated. But when I walked through the old Roman Forum and the city streets, it seemed so familiar to me at the time, and I didn't even believe in reincarnation at the time, but I knew my way around the city, that I had been in Pompeii before. It was covered with the eruption, so much so that I knew the way to go to the Colosseum. And I was with this Australian friend of mine. I go, we go down this way, maybe a quarter mile, and then we make a turn, and then we'll come right into the Colosseum. And there it was. And it still to this day, it even gives me goosebumps on my skin to talk about it. That's how I know it's interpersonal and real to me. And so when people start to have these kind of perceptions of their past lives, and travel is really so great for that, to go to places that you are familiar with, then you know it on a very interpersonal level that you've been here before. But then there's some things about Earth that are just so primitive and out of date and wrong, and we just want to change it, right? What we've been talking about the whole night tonight, because there's a better way. And we've lived in utopian, what we would consider a utopia-like society before, where there is no war, there is no suffering, there is no poverty and malnourishment. Where in planet Earth, it's 1 in 5 of us are going to bed tonight malnourished or starving. How are so many people still falling through the cracks when we're this advanced as a society? Or are we that advanced? Maybe we're only as advanced as the lowest common denominator. We're only as advanced as that starving child in Africa right now. And that's not very advanced.
No.
On the, what is it, the Kardashian, I'm not pronouncing that right, not Kardashian, the level of civilizations, it goes up to 5. We're not even at 1 yet. We're still a scale 0 civilization that we can't even have the basic needs met, all the people in our race. And
well, we're not taking
animals
care of the planet either.
take care of their own. What's that?
Yeah.
So we've got a ways to go.
Yeah, we do. We do. But, it has to be people like you that are here shouting in the wilderness trying to make people wake up. And I'm sure you're making a lot of people wake up. I'm sure that this will go out on archive tomorrow, and it's going to be there forever. Well, as long as YouTube's up and Rumble and stuff like that. So that what I love is that the vibration of these podcasts, not only ours, but all of them, will live forever. They'll float on the ether. They'll be picked up randomly 1 million years from now, and somebody will either think it's a great, reality show or a comedy or a great testimony to people who really were trying to change things and were doing their very best to put the message out there. I mean, it's in many ways the podcasts are messages in bottles thrown into space to let other people know where we are and not to make the same mistakes. Oh, I like that. I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to write that one down.
Your
you
moment of lucidity.
Yes.
Oh, that was beautiful.
But I just noticed our time. I want to thank you so much for coming back on and going into your book again, because it was so worth going into a second time and probably in another year a third time. It's a message that will never get old.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's very kind of you. And I love coming on with you. And anytime we want to do this again, even if it's a year from now, that sounds good. And we're just both here in service to all. We're just trying to do our best and help people understand this very thorny situation on planet Earth. We all find ourselves thrust into a very stark duality on this planet.
No. Beyond Esoteric, Escaping Prison Planet is a fabulous book, and it's on Amazon, and I'm sure it's on your publishing company, and that would be cccpublishing.com.
That's right. And that's where you can get a signed copy if you order through the cccpublishing.com website. Those go through my office, and I'm able to sign copies on their way out. But really appreciate your support and your kind words. And, let's get through it in this lifetime.
Well, you will. I'm sure I will have you back again, because I think there's always going to be more that's been unfolded, and we want to get into it all and just keep putting it out there, because sooner or later there will be a shift and a change, and things will go in another direction. Lord knows what it is, but humanity is not predictable, for sure. So, Brad, thanks so much again for being here, and I look forward to having you back again soon.
That sounds good. Thank you, Barbara, and we'll do it again for sure.
Okay, great. Good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. This will be up on YouTube. Please make sure that you follow us or subscribe to us or whatever that button is, and lets us know that you're there, because this is the only way we know you're listening. We so appreciate that. Good night, everybody, and don't forget tomorrow night, Mark Eddy has a great show, too, so tune back in then. Good night.